I'm Molly Gordon, for those of you who don't know me. I am a coach. I've been coaching since 1996. I became familiar with what we'll be talking about today, or the implications we'll be talking about today, the three principles, probably in 2009 thereabouts, and took a few years for it really to take root. Today my guest is Judy Sedgeman, and the reason I wanted to have Judy is from the beginning. When I first discovered her, I went, wow, here is someone who is really smart. I like smart people. I have a bias that way. But Judy also, to my way of thinking, has great vision. I was just so attracted by the combination of her vision, her heart, and her pragmatism. And we'll talk more about what I saw, but first I'm going to give you a little of her bio. Let's see here. So in addition to the three principles work she does herself through Sedgeman Consulting, Judy is an initiative consultant for the Patterson Foundation of Sarasota, Florida. Her project there is Transformational Evolution for Curriculum at the Ringling College of Art and Design. Judy served as the director of the Institute for Public Policy and Leadership at USF Sarasota Manatee for 2 years. She left that position in January 2012 to devote herself more to global outreach in innate health through her own consulting practice. Before that, and if you joined us early, you heard us talk a little bit about West Virginia, Judy spent nearly 12 years on the faculty of the West Virginia University School of Medicine, where she was director of an institute dedicated to innate health, and where she developed and taught courses for the master's program in public health. She's still an adjunct professor at WVU. She teaches 2 graduate courses online, both focused on resiliency and mental well-being, as well as a continuing education course about resiliency through WVU Extended Learning. Judy's passion is to serve others, focused on eliminating stress and accessing wisdom and resiliency. And if you go back to the webpage where you signed up for today's Hangout, you'll see that bio and also a link to Judy's website, as well as links to other three principles resources. And if you lost that link, don't worry, you'll get a follow-up email with a link to the replay and all the information you can stand about us.
So that's great. So you keep the replay and put it out. That's great.
Yes.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll take this recording and I'll shorten off and take off our chit chat at the beginning, and it will be up indefinitely. And I'll send you that link too, Judy, in case you want to put it anywhere.
I can share with people. I'd love to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. Great.
Yeah. Cool.
So what I thought I would do, folks, is just start with Judy having a little conversation about some of the things that inspired me to invite her today. And then we're a small group right now. Let me see how many folks we are. There's 5 of us all together. If you have a question or inspired, you might take yourself off mute and find a nice place to interject. And I will also pause at some point and just check in with people to see what's going on.
Yeah, we will do that for sure.
Yeah, great. So Judy, when we were talking yesterday, one of the things that I mentioned to you that I had intended to go look at your videos at threeprinciplesmovies.com. And you said, oh, don't do that.
They're long.
They're long. Yeah. Although I will encourage everybody to still do that in spite of what she says. But you did mention there was one in particular about the potential for world peace.
Yeah.
And that's pretty darn exciting.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be.
Be great if it could happen, right? Yeah, that would be a very exciting thing. Well, I see oh, there's my dog. For you guys that like dogs, she's a
Oh,
Jack.
there she is. Hello, darling.
She usually doesn't sit on that sofa, and she knows she's not supposed to, but she knows I'm not going to do anything about it while I'm on the phone.
Very clever. I love it.
Yeah, so she's like, "Hey, Mom, look at me."
That's excellent.
Look at that expression. Oh, geez.
Yes. She's got total control of the situation, and she's on video. We all now know who runs the office.
Right. Exactly. So anyway,
world peace.
World peace. Back to world peace, a small subject. So, well, you know, when I look at what's going on in the world today, it looks very complicated to people. You know, you watch what's happening, and everybody is like, oh, it's so hard we have to fight these people, and we have to bomb these people, and we have to cut off these people, and we have to punish these people. And it's all about, you know, punishment and power.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is that the only kind of thinking that people, institutions, governments, countries, globes have available to them when people are living in fear and insecurity is stuff like that. You know, everybody's in survival mode. So the quality of thinking that comes to mind when people are fearful and insecure is self-protection, cling to what I have, keep these people away from me. There's something wrong with them. I'm fine. And those are and if you look at life, when we're insecure personally in small ways in life, you know, like if you get insecure on your job, you know, then right away your thinking turns to proving yourself,
Mm-hmm.
Getting approval, getting people to think you're doing a good job, you know, covering your, you know what, all those things that people think of when they get insecure. When people are secure, they don't have those thoughts. There's a whole different quality of thought. So you can look at the same situation in a state of security, and you're looking for ways to connect, you know, ways to collaborate, ways to understand other people better, ways to appreciate the potential in situations, ways to find common ground, to look for solutions. And so what's gone wrong in the world is that I think that in the last, certainly in the United States, in the last number of years since 9/11, really, we've been terrorized. And keeping us terrorized has become a sort of a project of government. And as people get more and more frightened, they become more and more unable to tolerate differences. Mm-hmm. And that's true across the world. So, you know, when I talk about the hope for world peace, what I'm really talking about is that at any point, you know, people could suddenly realize what's going on. You realize what's happening in the sort of collective thinking of institutions, governments, people, politics, whatever, and go, wait a minute, you know, we're just insecure. We're all living in this terribly insecure thinking, and you know, we need to calm down. We need to take a fresh look. We need to look for some creative ideas. We need to find insights. And if people did that, things would change. And one perfect example of that just happened right here in the United States when that shooting happened in Charleston. Mm-hmm. Now, I was a militant civil rights activist in my youth, and I remember when that Confederate flag went up as a protest to the successes of Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And it was a really horrible thing, and then it stayed up for all these years, and it became sort of the symbol of oppression and racial divide and all of that in this country. And then this shooting happened, and then there was this huge surge of forgiveness from the people who you would least expect it from, who, as President Obama put it, found grace. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly the state legislature of South Carolina, which probably up until that particular day last week anybody that lives in this country would have said it's one of the most right-wing racist groups you can imagine, even though there are Black members of the legislature, came to a whole different way of seeing things. And they said, this flag we're done with this. It's over. And they took it down. And it wasn't even it was sort of a big deal, but it didn't last long. The big dealness kind of passed very quickly. Well, that's this can happen at any time. The Berlin Wall is another example.
It's a beautiful example.
The perfect example. I mean, everybody thought that's going to be there forever. We'll never be able to bring the two sides of Berlin together. And then at a certain point in time, people just said, no, we're done with this. We're over it. We're taking it down. And they did. And there were so many of them, the guards couldn't shoot them all. So the guards just said, we can't deal with this. There's nothing we can do. And the wall came down. Now, those moments in time, if you study history, have happened. They have happened. And what brings them about is a critical mass of people who see it differently.
Yeah.
In a moment, they change. They change their minds. And they don't change their minds because they should. It's politically correct. They want to say the right thing. They change their minds because when they look out their eyeballs, the world looks like a different place.
Yes. It strikes me that it may sound like you are describing something very simple in one way, but it's not simplistic.
No.
There are very deep and complex and layered changes that happen when we look with new eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that it's not just a mental act of pasting on the belief that everyone is my brother, or pasting on some make nice, liberal sounding thing. It's a true change in consciousness, which not only makes things look different, but also opens access to those new ideas, to the solutions that had been invisible until that very minute.
Right.
So what I want to point to is there's a practicality to what you're talking about that I think people overlook. They think it's just magical thinking.
No, it's not. It's not. And the reason it's not magical is because if it were magical, somebody would create it. Somebody
Absolutely.
would make this magic happen all the time. And people have tried that. It doesn't really work out. And you can't force change. But change comes when people quiet down and reflect and see things differently. And sometimes, sadly, it takes a tragedy for people to do that. Mm-hmm. And it can go either way. I mean, in the other example of 9/11, we all went the other way. Yeah. We got increasingly insecure instead of having a moment of reflection. And it's really funny because then I could see it coming because at the time that happened, I was at West Virginia University and I was writing what would have been a blog if there had been blogs back then, but it was an email list. It was essays that went out on an email list. And I wrote this thing about we're at a crossroads, and either we can look deeply and ask ourselves what happened in the world to make this an acceptable behavior for anybody, and how do we address that as humanity, or we can pull our borders tight and wrap ourselves in nationalism and say we're going to kill them.
Right.
Because look what they did to us. Well, and when I offered that choice out as just a philosophical choice, I started getting death threats.
Wow.
And people accused me of being unpatriotic. I mean, actually, I had protection for about a month. My office had bomb threats. And it really was people who got so frightened that the idea that you might forgive, that you might be able to see your role in it, that it may be a shared human problem that we could look at together and solve, that was unconscionable and unthinkable, which is exactly the opposite of what happened in Charleston.
Right.
So humanity is on this sort of seesaw back and forth between secure, this sort of the what everybody refers to as the kumbaya experience, let's bring people together. And one of the reasons that our president right now, President Obama, is at cross purposes with a lot of people is because he's really not afraid. And so he keeps wanting to make peace and create new relationships and overlook things and get beyond it. And that's really just it's a bridge too far for a lot of people.
Yeah.
On the other hand, he can't talk anybody into changing, you know. You can see that doesn't happen. You can't have, even if you're a great leader, or not a great leader, but a leader, even if you're a leader, you can't get up there and say, we should see this differently, because people either see it or they don't.
Right.
So that's why my feeling is that what we've got to contribute from the principles is find it for yourself. And then a critical mass of people who lives at peace and thinks from clarity and calm will change the world.
Right.
So
what I've been hearing, a thread that's run through what you're saying, Judy, that strikes me is calming down.
mm-hmm.
and security versus insecurity.
Right.
That when we respond to insecurity, which is a human experience, we all have it. When we respond to that by making it very significant and trying to protect ourselves against insecurity, we get ramped up, confused, busy-minded, fearful, resentful, vengeful, yada, yada. But there's a way in which, and I feel like you can almost see it in the YouTube video of the state legislator, the woman in South Carolina, when she gave her talk the other day, and she kept pointing at the floor, and she said, we've got to stop here. This has to stop here. And while she was very impassioned, there was a way in which how she spoke and the impact of what she spoke was to settle people down.
Yeah. Well, she was very clear.
Yeah.
That was really what it was. It was very clear to her. And it probably helped a lot of them too that she was a direct descendant of Jefferson Davis, the first president of the Confederacy. So they couldn't say, well, she's just some liberal weirdo with bad background.
Right. Right.
So, anyway.
Sure.
But nonetheless, I think leadership is a valuable thing, and that's why we try to reach leaders with this understanding. But really, the wise leaders are the ones that try to share the understanding with their people, not that try to force it on them.
Right.
Not that try to say, well, I'm smarter than you, so we'll do it my way.
Yes.
It's so it's subtle, but it's really true. You cannot make people see something they can't see.
Right. So you have worked for many years with individuals and inside institutions.
Yep.
And it boggles my mind thinking about working inside a medical school.
Especially with a master's degree in linguistics. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that I have a doctoral in psychology now is strictly a function of the fact that I got the message.
Yeah, right. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So what's your experience? What can you tell us about how you share this understanding person to person, whether you're in an institutional setting or sitting one-on-one in an office with a client?
Well, I tell you, the one thing that's so, we always talk among people who work in the three principles about the health of the helper, but that is where it's at. It's in the feeling and it's in the health of the helper. So if you're not living in a state which looks real to people, and you're talking about that state as though it might be real for them, which is, when you think about it, if you don't see it for yourself and you can't be there, how are you going to get anybody else to even be interested? So the most important thing, I knew that when I got there, the most important thing that I could do is to make sure I didn't give away my peace of mind to fear of the circumstance I found myself in. And I also knew that I couldn't make anybody listen. I had no credibility whatsoever. I was not a doctor. I was not an academic. I was brought in by the dean of the medical school, and they all thought of me as this kind of like like flavor of the month, oh, he went to this seminar and thought this was great, but it'll pass, so they kind of had a dismissive attitude. And so what I did is I spent a lot of time just being helpful in any way I could in the medical school. So my job, according to the dean, was to change the culture. And naturally, I didn't tell anybody that. So I was like, hey, I'm here to change your culture.
Yeah, that'll make you popular.
That would have been a great thing. But I looked at the culture. First of all, you can't even enter a culture until you understand the culture. So I was trying to understand. And one of the first things I noticed is that medical students enter medical school with this very beautiful feeling. The reason they want to go to medical school and they're so excited to be there their first week, is that they, at last, they're going to learn how to take care of people and save lives and bring babies into the world and treat disease. And, it's very exciting to them, and they're very high-spirited and very optimistic and very, hopeful. And somehow by the time they get to be third-year medical students, they're cynical, discouraged, depressed, anxious. And I thought, well, that's kind of, what is it in this culture that creates that instead of nurturing the way they came in?
Mm-hmm.
That was the question I finally came to, that it took me a while. I had to kind of observe, and I went to free lectures, and I got to know department heads. I just visited with people. I invited people to coffee. I was just like a friendly person who would volunteer on committees and show up and, try to make friends with people. And no one really knew what I was doing. So when I felt like I started to understand that there's something in this culture that is, instead of maintaining that beautiful feeling of service and love, people become scared, competitive, nasty, tired, exhausted, and so on. And so, and I wondered if they even noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if it was so sort of baked into the way it is that people just said, well, that must be the way it is when you go to medical school, that no one ever thought it might not be that way. So I decided that what I wanted to do was have a retreat with the deans and the department heads, because I just really want to inquire, is this something you see? Is this important to you? Is it a good idea for them to get this? So I was genuinely curious, because,
Mm-hmm.
it's happening and visible. So does anybody care? And so and of course, again, because I was actually the person that Dee brought in, and he knew what my job was. I'd really like to have a retreat for the deans and the department heads, and just have a neutral topic,
Mm-hmm.
something like, and you would have to do it with me as the dean. You'd have to want to be there and be part of it, and just talk about, like, what is the student experience really like for people, and is that our best,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to, that's the question I want to raise, but I don't want to call it that. So I call it nurturing service in students.
Right.
That's important. So we had something like that. And not everybody came, but a lot of people came because the dean put the invitation out. So, and I genuinely inquired, what is it? What kind of changes for students that I'm new, I'm coming in from the outside, and I've seen this sort of progression psychologically in students. And for one thing, it was kind of news to a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I pointed it out, they could see it, but that it had never crossed their mind as a problem. So, and they all went through it when they went to medical school, so that was fine with them. But then the idea that service was kind of like, I was like, well, what would be the essence of medical training if there was no curriculum now, if you didn't have a medical school, what's the point? Well, so this was like a 3-day retreat. And at the first day, they fought tooth and nail. Like the point is to make sure they really know anatomy and physiology and blah, 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 blah. And the point is that it was all about curriculum and all of that. But then it's interesting over the course of time, and it was just really me just being an innocent observer and asking questions and asking them to reflect. And please, you don't have to take for granted that what you think now is the only thing you'll ever think about it. And I talked a little bit about thought, but I tried to stay low key. On the last day, they came up with the statement that, when you think about it, the essence of healthcare is love.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from?
Came right from them because they all had innate health, And what I want to say to you is the reason why I could do those things over and over again in the medical school, and so could Bill Pettit when he joined me there, and so could everybody I brought in, is because I didn't really care what they thought. I knew that deep down we're all the same. And the essence, the spiritual essence of all people is love. Love is the answer. And if you respectfully look there, you'll see it. And if you call it, it comes out, And what was really funny is that the dean of medicine at the time, who later became the dean of the medical school when our dean was promoted to a vice presidency, went to an American Medical Association conference the week after this retreat. And they actually rewrote their values. They rewrote their values and they added the word love. And as a matter of fact, the word love was the first one. And they added respect and they added trust and they added, and they still had education and all those other things too. So he went to the AMA and he shared that. And people laughed at him. And they said, come on, love. What's love got to do with it? And so he actually tried to get me on the program at the American Medical Association, and they wouldn't do it. But it to his credit, he didn't care that they laughed at him. It was okay with him. He just, the poor things don't see it. But and that really was the beginning of what was a shift in the way people thought about their relationship with their students. I mean, I knew nothing about what they teach. I mean, I don't care what they were teaching in the classroom or anything. It was like, how do you feel? How do you approach people? What do you look at? Well, what happened is I got written into, they have a academic review committee, which when kids get put on probation, I mean, first of all, if you get into medical school, you're smart enough to be there. Nobody gets into medical school is too dumb to do the work. That there's too competitive, there's too many applicants. It's very weeded out. So if a person actually attends medical school, there's nothing that they couldn't possibly do in the curriculum. So if they're not doing it, it's nothing to do with their intelligence. And they don't need tutoring. They need psychological help. And they saw that. And so they wrote me in, because a lot of them would not go to behavioral medicine. They didn't want to be diagnosed. They didn't want to take psychotropic meds. They didn't want to take medicines for depression or anything because they had to study really hard and they couldn't afford to alter their minds. Plus, they didn't want to be labeled. So they put me into the program for people that were on probation. So they would be on probation. They'd have to bring their grades up by a certain time. They would have to repeat a certain course. They would have to do whatever it is. And they would have to talk to me. And so since I was written into their probation, they didn't have a lot of choice about it. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me because these students would change. And all of my students that were sent to me through that process did fine. They got through their probation. Nobody got thrown out of medical school. Nobody dropped out. Nobody failed out. And And that got the attention of the department chairs. And so they started asking me to do retreats for their department. And so that way I was able to talk to faculty directly instead of, through the deans. But, so that was the good part. That was the good part. And it was just a matter of being very patient and always knowing that they're deep down, we're all the same. We're all fine. We're all perfectly mentally well, and we can all have a whole new look at things. We can see things differently at any given moment. Doesn't matter how long you've thought something, you could think something else.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that was the good part. Now there were a lot of things that happened from the outside that were bad and difficult, but in the long run, I would say the dean, if you called him up and asked him, he's retired now and he lives in California, but he would say, yes, we did change. For that period of time, we did change the culture. And I'm sure that some of that change persisted because people became much quieter and more reflective, more respectful of students, more willing to find help for a student rather than condemn them. More willing to say, what can we do to help you? More willing to see their own role when things went bad. I know I had one student that got into a fight, and not a fist fight, but a verbal fight with one of his professors. And now he was a hot-headed kid, so I'll grant you that. But this person had done a very unfair thing. She just got a thing about him. He annoyed her for some reason, and so sort of punitively, she did something academically which caused him to lose an opportunity, which was not based in anything but her opinion. It wasn't that he shouldn't have had that opportunity. So he was very upset about it, and he was going to go talk to her about it, but he got so angry thinking about it on the way to talk to her about it that instead of talking to her, he yelled at her. And of course, when you yell at a professor, it's not a good thing. So it does not go well. And so, but the worst thing is she yelled back, and then it turned into a thing where a third party had to come in and intervene. And the kid, of course, is the person that got in trouble. So I went to talk to her after he told me this story, the young man. And I said, look, first of all, you know better than to do that. When you found yourself getting mad, walking down the hall towards that door, you should have turned around and walked the other way till you calmed down. He said, yeah, I know, but I was so mad, But the same token, she didn't have to escalate it. She could have tempered it. So I went to talk to her and I said, do you think there's anything in your thinking about this young man that contributed to his upset and to the bad feeling between the two of you? And at first she said, no, absolutely not. I'm a teacher. I judge all my students, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, if you were really going to reflect on it, really look deeply, do you feel the same way about him as you do about, let's say, and I named some other student who I knew was the one that got the opportunity. And she said, well, no, I don't. And I said, why not? I mean, do you think what's different between them? She said, well, this other one is very compliant. And this young man argues, the one she didn't like. And I said, so would you say that in your world, there are times when you don't like it when people argue with you? She said, no, I definitely don't like that. I'm a professor and I worked hard for my position. It was all ego, it was all this stuff. So I'm just sitting there listening, and I said, well, do you think that's sort of like his problem too? You guys are more alike than different the way I see it, because that's kind of like how he is. He's a really good student. He's very proud of his accomplishments. He expects to be recognized. It matters to him. And she kind of took a deep breath and she said, yeah, that's really, I'm not compliant either, So I said, well, do you think if I had, let's say that you and me and he had coffee, you think that would be okay? Do you think we could just talk?
Mm.
And she said, well, it's really not I don't generally socialize with my students. And I said, this is not social. I said, I'm just asking you, I'll make it in my office if you want. You know, I don't care where we have coffee. We don't have to go into the cafeteria, but I just think it'd be nice to just sit down, have a cup of coffee. It's kind of a self-defining experience. You finish your coffee, you're done. and so she agreed to it. I had a hard time talking him into it, to be honest with you, but I said, look, you got to get off probation. And one of the keys to your getting off probation is her agreeing that you can go back to that class. And so we had coffee, and, you know, it turned out to be a really nice conversation because they really saw themselves in each other, you know, since I brought it up that way. I mean, they could see it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a mystery. And then they kind of felt compassion. You know, he saw that she did the same thing he did. He got upset and she got upset. And that if one of them hadn't gotten upset, it probably wouldn't have happened. You know, I mean, they just sort of saw that it was like both of them got into it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was really at fault. And so she wrote the letter that relieved him of his probation. And he went back to the classes and he did better, and he saw me for a few more times. But the point of all of this is what they had to see was what I could see, that deep down, we're all the same.
Yeah.
We're just taking our thinking seriously and acting on it as though it was really important.
Yeah.
And as soon as we see that, we realize it's just a thought. It's the way we're thinking right now. It's the state of mind we're in and the way we're thinking. And it could change. So that was my mission there, and that's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah. That capacity for change, and your confidence that everyone has it.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing that you have to bring in or teach them even. It's really a radically different approach from all the other healing modalities, as well-intentioned as they are.
Yeah.
Our healing and therapeutic modalities are about finding out what's broken and fixing it. By the way, if you mouse over your own picture, you will find a place to mute your audio. There's also a place in the very bottom of the window where you can turn off your video. There's a little video camera on the bottom left. If you don't want to be on video, you can turn it off. Some of you have done other solutions that are very creative, and that's fine too. But if you're not speaking, it would be nice to mute your audio. Just mouse over your own screen, and a little button will come up.
There you go. Yeah.
And this seems like a good time to
you could also unmute your audio if you want to ask a question. Yeah.
Exactly, to invite people to unmute if you have a question. Judy and I do not have a master plan for this conversation.
No master plan.
I wanted I'm just going in the direction of what attracted me to her and to her work, and that was this combination of great heart and vision and what I see as immense practicality. One thing occurs to me, we've referenced the 3 principles a number of times, and I don't know what people know about the 3 principles, so it might be useful to just give a brief introduction. One of the things I love about Judy's work is she doesn't get caught up in the intellectual understanding of these principles, but it's still useful perhaps as a framework. So does that feel like a place to go to you, Judy?
Sure, if you'd like. I thought you were going to do it, so I was going to listen to you. So.
Well,
you want me to talk about the principles?
Yeah, why don't you? I would love to hear you do that.
Okay. Well, let me ask a question. For those people that are willing to answer a question, of the people on this call, is there anybody here who has no knowledge of what we're talking about and is completely baffled by the whole idea that there may be some principles involved here? Speak now or forever hold your peace. So I'm assuming you were drawn to this call because you have some exposure to the three principles. Okay. Well, we all talk about it in our own way, and I would never probably say the same thing twice, because I find it not helpful when I'm working with people to start at the point of saying, now, what I want to explain to you is that there's these three principles, and they explain everything. And because that gets people very into their intellect right away, because they feel like, oh, I've got to learn something. Now I've got to learn about these principles. So my goal is to get people to see it for themselves, so that it comes out. Like people, I'd feel much better if I've talked to a person and asked them questions for a while, and they suddenly say, so are you saying that I'm thinking all this up? And I'll go, yeah, that's kind of how it works. You're always thinking, and your thinking looks really important to you until you think something else. And then they'll go like, well, what about the world? These bad things happen. Am I supposed to not think about them? And I'll go, well, like, what do you think? Do you notice that sometimes you see it differently, and sometimes something bad happens and it's no big deal, and another time something not so bad but annoying happens and ruins your day? Oh yeah, that happens. Well, what do you think is, if it was caused by the outside world, wouldn't it always be bad? It's like, wouldn't bad things just be bad, and you'd think bad about them all the time? But you're saying you could look at the same thing on 2 different days, and it looks bad one day and not so bad the next. So where's that coming from? And somebody will say, well, so are you saying that I feel differently at different times? And I'm going, yeah, because we live in a state of mind, and the thoughts that we become conscious of look different to us in different states of mind, which are always changing. Well, how does that happen? That's because energy is always flowing through us, and we are, at some point using it more or less effectively to create our thinking and our reality. So, and then I'll say that's kind of a system. It's kind of like the thing that people don't know about themselves. That's what we all have in common, is that how we live our lives is that we're alive. Everybody knows the difference between the living and the dead. It's not that hard to figure out that there's some kind of spiritual energy that's at work in the universe, so that the living things manifest it, and how we manifest that energy is through our thinking. So we're able to use it to create thoughts, so that we can then look out at the world and apply that thinking to what we're looking at, and that becomes our reality. And then people will say something like, well, so there's no real reality? And I'm going like, well, yeah, there's a table here, and we would all agree that we're in a conference room, there's a chair. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, but if I asked everybody in the room, to describe it, they would all say it different, because they would think of what they saw, or their feelings about what they saw. So, and sometimes I've even done that before I even get to that point. I'll say, okay, we all agree we're in room C, and it definitely is in, kind of typical college classroom, right? So yeah, what do you think? Are the chairs comfortable? And some people would say, yeah, they're pretty good, and other people would say, no, I hate these chairs. And somebody else would say, well, they're better than the ones I used to have. And somebody else would say, and then I'd say, well, what about these walls? This kind of gray-green color, do you like it? Well, I'm used to it. It's kind of good, neutral, institutional color. You could put all your charts up. It doesn't interfere with the things you're trying to show students. And somebody else will say, no, it reminds me of a hospital. It's horrible. And then after that, you do that for just a little bit. And then you say to people, do you see how it is? Yes, there is a real reality, but my reality, my experience of that reality is not the same as your experience of that reality, even though we would agree basically that it's there. And that, that's a real, you got to keep it as simple as possible, because I think a lot of times what happens to people when they get involved in the principles, it's very spiritual, it's very profound, it's very touching. And they forget that the way people get touched is through ordinary moments in life.
Mm.
You don't need to be some big philosopher, speaking on some higher plane to touch people's hearts. You just have to speak truth to their heart, and their truth answers. It's just that simple. So when I talk about the principles, I usually just kind of draw people into reflecting on, where is this coming from for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then I can say, and actually there's a whole, kind of system of expressing this that people have come upon in order to try to change the way we look at each other and the way we look at psychology. And all the 3 principles, and these are the 3 principles, and then I'll tell them. There's mind, and that's that energy that we talked about, that spiritual energy of all things. And then there's thought as a principle, refers to that ability we have to bring those thoughts to mind, to our own mind, our small mind, our personal mind. And then there's consciousness, which means we know what we're thinking and we see it, looks real to us. And so that time, I do everything I can to demystify it, because the words are not the point.
Right.
How you define the principles, what you say about them, that's really not the point. The point is for people to, in their own minds, wake up and go, oh my gosh, I'm thinking all this stuff up. I'm making it up. And then I'm acting like everybody else is seeing the same thing I'm seeing. That's not true, and that takes all the pain out of it,
Right.
So anyway, that's my deal.
I love that. And Renata, I'm going to call on you in just a moment. I just can't help myself. I have something to say.
Okay.
What strikes me about the way you described how you share the principles, Judy, is that by keeping it very simple, you're honoring the innate health and the wisdom in the listener.
Every person. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was when I first came across the principles, I did some research online. I saw a couple of videos of George Pransky talking about them, and I kind of went, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem to be news to me that I was thinking it up.
No, it shouldn't be.
Right. And yet, then I saw a video of Bill Pettit, and I'm sorry, guys, that I don't know which one it was, but I saw Bill Pettit talk about his experience with even the most severely mentally ill. And it was so palpably clear that he did not see a problem, that he saw the wholeness and well-being in each person. And it is that combination of the insight of how we create our reality moment to moment in thought, and there is something utterly and fully okay about us all the time. And it's those 2 things together that to me makes Sid's insights of the principles mind-blowing. And the way that I see you talking, Judy, and the way you model sharing seems to me to just embody a recognition of both those things. And I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that too. And I have to tell you that the first person that introduced me to this work was Bill Pettit. So I'm sure that influenced me because I observed him working with people a lot. But of course, he was a psychiatrist and I, at that time, was running a business. So I didn't live in his world, but I could see the respect for, I knew that. I knew that as just as a pragmatic fact, as a business person. If you can't do business with people you disrespect, well, you can, but it doesn't work out well. And so why would you think you could heal people that you didn't respect or that you thought was something wrong with them? I mean, who am I to say how to fix your thing? And so, and it's funny because I was in a consulting business, and we were very smart. And the hardest thing for me to overcome was the fact that being smart was pointless. But because we were very smart, we were very good at what we did, and our clients thought we were smart and they were happy to pay us for what we did, but they never took our advice until I got into this work.
Wow.
They never, and so we would do this thing called, and I'm sorry, someone has a question. Can I finish or should I stop and answer? Okay.
Finish and then we'll go to Renata. Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Judy.
So we would go in and we would analyze physician practices, right? So go in there, we used to do a thing called a practice evaluation. And, you know, we would look at the office, we'd look at the charts, we'd look at the doctor's relations with the hospital, the contracts, the blah, blah, blah. And then we would write a report and we would point out the areas where they were having trouble, where there were difficulties. And then we would suggest solutions, a lot of which, of course, involved hiring us, but that was the point, you know. And, but a lot of them were things that they could do themselves, or they could hire somebody else too. I mean, it didn't really, we didn't say you had to be us. It just said you might need an accountant or you might need help with this or that. So now we would present these practice evaluations. And again, we were smart. We were good at what we did. We were nice. You know, we liked people. We didn't blame them for what was going wrong. We were just pointing it out. So they would have a good time. They'd come to the evaluation, you know, we'd eat cookies and coffee and share all this information. They'd be all excited. They'd say, yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. This is great stuff. Thank you so much. And they would leave and they would send us the check. And then, you know, usually about a month later, if I hadn't heard from them, I would call them and I'd say, you know, how's it going? You know, I'm just checking in just to see how you're. And they'd say, well, you know, those, we're so busy. It's really hard to get around to doing all those things. But they'd always have a reason. They had the evaluation. It was on a shelf somewhere. They were very appreciative. They thought it was great, but they hadn't done it. And it was frustrating. It was like, this is good advice. You know, and then as soon as I saw Bill working with his clients, I recognized you can't tell other people what to do unless they see it for themselves. Giving people advice, they may think it's wonderful. They may think you're really smart. They may think you're wonderful. They may even be happy to pay for it, but it isn't going to help them. The only thing that helps them is helping them to see where it is, to see where the answers are in themselves. And then you don't have to tell them anything.
That's brilliant.
So we changed our whole consulting practice. And instead of doing a practice evaluation, we would do a retreat with the doctors. And we would get them to tell us what was wrong through the course of just like the medical thing was. And then we would say, how can we work together to fix those things that you're trying to address? Well, then it was their idea. And it flourished. It was great. And everybody enjoyed it. And the doctors didn't feel stupid. You know, they felt like they were the solution and we were just implementers, which is the way it's supposed to be. Right. Not that we were coming up with the solutions and they couldn't do it. That was backwards. Anyway, that's the end of that.
That's
Sorry
great.
about it.
No, I think it's really valuable and it applies. I love that you had a business example of that.
Yeah.
It's true in the therapeutic and helping professions, but it's true in business. It's true in getting people to take your advice about how to take care of their cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Renata, do you have a question or a comment?
You have to turn your microphone on.
Anytime. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Everyone. Anytime I was about to ask a question in a conversation, it would be answered. I love that synchronicity all the time.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity, I thought there would be, in my mind, like 100-person queuing in 25 places. So I put my Zoom on automatic 15 minutes before the meeting. And I said to Molly, I said, don't worry, I'm going to make myself a smoothie and, you know, I'll be in line just in case. But I thanked her for what I called congruency. And I'd like to bring this up in the sense that the congruency for me is that loving space that's been talked about here, that each of us has in our hearts. From that certainty, unless we get thought condition or caught up, however you want to say it, in our thoughts, otherwise, love basically is it. And from that, we are sane, we are wise, we are exactly where we're supposed to be and doing what we should, even when we can't.
Mm.
And for a while in my life, the congruency I was grateful for with Molly and everyone, I don't have the chance of the other people, but even in listening to the videos that you've posted, Judith, the one about the peace on 3P, absolutely. And I think the one that Molly referred to was when you spoke about a young lady that was no longer living, that Bill had taken under his wing, and you were speaking with the mother on your
Yes.
channel.
Yeah.
And for me, that congruency is like the most potent essence to all gift and contribution. We can be talking about pies instead of 3Ps.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, within me, when I come in touch with people who have that within them, who come from that state, that space, I get calm.
Mm.
And who I am makes perfect sense. And do I have things to learn and everything? Absolutely. But the part I remember recently, I was so grateful after listening to the piece a couple of months ago that I wrote a thank you to on your Facebook page, Judith.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that I went
You.
from the heavy duty dissociation disorder, multiple personality, to supposedly perfectly
Yeah.
only anxious nut. And
Oh, how sweet. Thank you so much.
And I did overdo it. At first I was going, oh man, every time she speaks to me, I feel great. And then at some point, I realized that it was there. I didn't have to seek it from the outside.
It's in you, absolutely.
Yeah. But the way you expressed it when I first posted the comment, for me, I was just doing it as a thank you, like I would do with Molly today and everybody else. And you went, yay, celebration of our everybody's innate thing. And all of a sudden I looked at it and I went, gee, I guess I am sane.
Yeah.
And now I have no doubt,
Mm.
even recently. And
good, because there's no reason to doubt it, you know.
yeah, the difference, the wonderful difference with, I think not sure if it was in something you shared, but in one of the 3P community at some point, somebody made a distinction that saying to somebody, again, like you said, if you're talking to somebody and you're giving them advice, no. If you're letting them come to their own wisdom because of the loving space, it works. So all this blah, blah that I'm saying, the testimony I hope I'm offering is we're all okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to make ourselves nuts with our thoughts. And recently I have the experience that it manifests really quickly as disease in my body.
Yeah.
Going blind to different things.
Yeah.
And now in the last few months, there's been a few events where all of a sudden I found myself just observing, and instead of having somebody making me angry by saying, oh, it's just thought, Renata, I was going, oh, it's just a thought.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to make yourself angry when you're right. Yeah.
And it's quite amazing. The practical aspect is it's going to cost me much less in anxiety medicines and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's very practical.
I get to have full night's sleeps instead of nightmares on ends and everything. It's very, very good for the health.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I'm not making big plans as to how I'm supposed to recuperate from something.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go with it and take it from there. At first, when I heard about the 3 principles, I was going on these automatic things. I'm supposed to earn my place. I'm supposed to prove myself and everything. The only thing that I had on my mind when I signed up for this webinar, and I guess I'm answering my own question, if I had the thought that I still had things to overcome, then I would create that.
Yeah.
And
That's
as I was,
exactly right. That's exactly where it comes from. You make it up and then it's real and then you deal with it.
so now I get to live life in this world of form, as they like to say it in the 3P, without wasting energy in pointless Fruit Loop thoughts and different things like that. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I'm taking more time for myself, and I'm very grateful for that. And
That's a good thing. Yeah.
yes. And it's quite amazing because, as you said at the beginning, both of you, when we come to that loving understanding, it's sort of like, it's not something intellectual. All of a sudden, I find myself smiling to somebody that I would have run from in fear because they're in a bad way. They're in a bad state, and they usually scream at me or something because they're caught up in their heads. I'm not going to invite them in my house, but I'm not going to be upset. And it's quite amazing how this understanding does. The best part, any and all understanding, whether we call it 3P or anything else, without this congruency of inner peace through love, not going to happen.
Right.
It's all in the feeling. It's all in the feeling.
I'm closing not as an ego thing, but as much as echo of all our choices, each and every one of us here. I was fortunate enough to be inspired to take a vow of peace in my thoughts, in my feelings, in 2009. I've been able to experience it more and more since last year, since for me the 3 principle understanding made sense, and because I was ready. Combination of both. And whether or not I see global world peace at every outside level on earth in my lifetime, it's not important anymore because it's there.
Yeah. It's right there. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just don't know. And we can't predict when, and it's not our job to say when,
There's this ancient saying that sometimes is attributed to Confucius or somebody else, which says, when there's beauty in the character, there is peace in the heart, and when there's peace in the heart, there's peace in the nation. And that's how it's going to work.
Yeah.
So I thank you very, very much for this space and this time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Renata. And thank you, Judy. Our time just flew by. Wow.
Oh my gosh, it's up.
I know.
No, I'll be happy to come back sometime. This is fun.
Oh, good. We'll definitely
I so appreciate what you do, Molly, because you're doing your utmost to make it easy for people.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
That's lovely. It's just very lovely, and I'm so grateful that you invited me. So thank you very much for you guys for letting me into your time this hour.
Great. And thank you, folks, for showing up, for joining us. I really appreciate it. This was a first test of Zoom for me, so it went really well, and I appreciate you guys finding your way. And now I have some ideas about how to help people find their ways more easily next time, if I remember. So thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Okay.